everyone, and welcome to the third entry of the Squat Cobbler Halloween series. And just like the Halloween film series, we're mixing things up this time, so the presentation's a little bit different. I am Mike at Official Pagan on everything, and joining us as always.
Hi, everybody. This is Kelly at KELLYTHUL on Twitter and Instagram.
And make sure you guys like and subscribe so you can see more of our beautiful faces gracing you at least weekly.
Yeah. Good news is it's not always our faces. Sometimes we only show gameplay. It's a big win for you, but not this week.
Nope, no. This time we're talking about it. Like I said, switching things up. Tony's not here this time, and you're getting our camera ready perfection.
That's right. Something like that.
Well, Kelly, since normally I kick it off with Halloween gaming recommendations, how about this time? Since we're switching everything up, you take the first recommendation.
Yeah, happy to. And you know, in all candor, I'm glad Tony's not here because every time for our other Halloween ones, he would talk up your games, what you were talking about, but oddly enough, not a mention what I was talking about. But hey, you know, if that's how he rolls, that's how he rolls. Fine.
Plus, he let it spill to everybody that you do, in fact, have an Anton LaVey room in your
Yeah,
house.
yeah, that. Yeah, there was that too. He slid that in. He slid that in. So I guess truth is a defense. Anyway, so this will be a little happy to go first. It will be a little odd here because I have a hunch the one I'm talking about came out after the one you're going to talk about, but I am talking about the Real Ghostbusters arcade game. So Ghostbusters came out in I think 1984. They eventually milked it with other sequels, but in addition they said, hey, let's go for the kids too. So the Real Ghostbusters came out, which was a cartoon series in 1987, and so this is the Real Ghostbusters arcade game, based, I assume, on the cartoon series, but it doesn't really matter because the Ghostbusters are indistinguishable in the gameplay. You couldn't tell where they were from. You can tell it's a guy with a proton pack and probably a coverall, but that's about it in terms of the delivery of it. The really kind of cool thing about this game is that it is basically a reskinning of a Japanese game that was called Labyrinth Hunter G. And so this was the basic bones of this video game was that. They then kind of did a reskinning, improved your weaponry significantly, which I think was one of the big frustrations with Labyrinth Hunter G was super, super difficult game to play and pretty minimal firepower. There were power-ups available, but they were hard to get to. They disappeared really quick. And it was a little bit difficult there. It was also, well, you have multiple lives. There's no life meter. It's a one hit and you're done kind of deal. So tough game to play.
That's definitely interesting that you mentioned that because I remember playing. There was a number of Ghostbusters games after the success of the movie, and then of course the cartoon that you mentioned. I do remember playing other Ghostbusters games, which are all sort of variations of each other, same sort of gameplay mechanics. And I remember playing this one, and this is the one that's sort of the odd man out. Completely different gameplay style and mechanics, so that makes sense hearing that, and I was not aware of that.
Yeah, I think so it's challenging, definitely challenging. You do, as opposed to Labyrinth Hunter G, you have the proton beam now, which is very effective and a pretty good dose of energy. So you do have to power up occasionally to kind of get things going again, but you've got a lot of firepower going and a secondary weapon as well to go in. What's kind of cool as you take out the various enemies down the road, they leave their corporal form, they become ghosts, and you can then use your proton beam to capture them, to put them in your little ghost lunchbox. And at the kind of end of each episode, as you kind of complete a level, you're able to go turn those in and put them in the grid, like kind of like in the movie. So that was pretty cool. It's not. Its source is a game called Labyrinth Hunter G, so you would assume mazes and all that. And loosely speaking, I guess, but it's not strictly a maze game. You do have multiple levels, left, right. You've got to kind of make your way around to kind of find where you need to go to get to reach the next level, meet the boss or bosses to get a key to go to the next level. But it gives you some capabilities you don't typically get in a maze game, in that you can use parts of the scenery and other things to build bridges. If your way is blocked or you've kind of taken a turn, you need to get somewhere else. There's some things you can do to kind of act upon the environment to move around and go. So, like I said, I enjoy it. It's a good game, very challenging. You've got a little bit of the kind of find your way through this maze or labyrinth to get to the next level. Slimer, on most versions of the game, Slimer's there available as a power-up. And as he shows up as a power-up, he'll kind of circle around you and help you out with the enemies, which is kind of helpful. And it's pretty cool. My only quibble, or major quibble, with this game is they did kind of like a MIDI version of the Ghostbusters theme, the kind of main cadence of the Ghostbusters theme. It's a fairly short snippet of it that they play on a constant loop through the entire game. And so if you're successful, you're punished for your success because this thing just keeps droning on. And it's pretty cool. You know, when it first starts off, it's really great. But that's it. No variation. You're just going to get that thing playing over and over and over again. And that can get a little bit wearing. But I think a really fun game. It's got that neat history of really being a reskinned version of a Japanese game. They didn't create a whole lot of gaming system ports, so there's not like stuff available for a lot of the gaming systems. However, they did make computer versions, so on things like the Amiga or the Commodore, different systems, you could play this game as more of a computer video game, but it wasn't really available on too many of the consoles. So, but a pretty cool game, the Real Ghostbusters. I think it's a good one to kind of wrap up my recommendations for our Halloween special.
Definitely. I mean, you can't go wrong with Ghostbusters and Halloween. Now, are you a fan of the Ghostbusters franchise or just this game?
As from an arcade standpoint, or from the movie? In general,
movies.
Yeah, I like the Ghostbusters universe. I think it's pretty good. The sequels, the first one was magic, and there was a lot of very, very cool things with that. But the sequel I thought was pretty solid as well. I'm not really going to speak on to any recent Ghostbusters forays, but kind of from the traditional cast, the first movie and the sequel, I enjoyed. I thought it was good. I did not care for the Real Ghostbusters cartoon, mostly because they made a choice to have Aegon have blonde hair, which always kind of threw me a little bit. So outside of the cartoon series, I'd say I was pretty cool with it.
Okay, interesting. Well, I was a little bit of a fan of the cartoon series. What I can say to show that, I have original animation cells and sketches from the Real Ghostbusters cartoon.
Nice. Well, that might have made me. If I had those, maybe I'd have been a bigger fan.
So I'm a little bit of a fan of the cartoon series. So for anybody who doesn't know, as Kelly pointed out, the cartoon series and the franchise as a whole for a little bit there was rebranded the Real Ghostbusters for a while. So that goes back to the first movie for anybody who's not familiar. There were other properties named Ghostbusters when the first movie came out. There was some live action stuff, and there was also a cartoon series called Ghostbusters. They ran into some trouble making the first movie, but crazy Dan Aykroyd was able to kind of, wiggle his way through that, and they were able to get it with, I guess, minimal damage. But then when they did the spin-off cartoon series, the creators of the Ghostbusters cartoon series, because there was a live action movie and show, and then there was a cartoon series called Ghostbusters long before the first film that we think of as Ghostbusters. They're so different, but there are weird similarities. Dan Aykroyd to this day swears he has never seen any of the original Ghostbusters stuff. But they work out of a converted firehouse. They drive an ambulance. things like that. So I mean, there are weird similarities. Other than that, though, the characters are completely different. The scenarios and setups are completely different, but there are like weird cosmetic things that are the same. But drunken Dan Aykroyd says that he's, and it sounds like I'm making fun of Dan Aykroyd, but he is one of my absolute favorites. If you haven't seen it, my greatest Halloween recommendation and gift to all of you: go watch Dan Aykroyd Unplugged. Have you ever seen that, Kelly?
I have, I have
Do
not.
me a favor, go online, find it, change your life. um, it is just a camera like the one you see behind me from a video shoot we were doing earlier. Just a camera on a tripod set up for an hour, 70 minutes, something like that, of Dan Aykroyd just pounding vodka and chain smoking, talking directly into the camera. Uh, Conspiracy theories, ghosts, UFOs, how the government shut down his show where he played a preacher. It's amazing. Basically the same or slightly less quality of us doing a Zoom call.
Well, there you go.
So awesome,
Yeah.
awesome stuff. If you
Well,
ever wanted to peel back the facade of Dan Aykroyd and really get in there.
yeah, he has a couple extra gears that most of us don't, and I believe, uh, so Aykroyd wrote the original Ghostbusters script, and
Yes,
as they
he
went
is
through
the
that,
creator of Ghostbusters.
Ghostbusters
Given that there were two other Ghostbusters prior
before
to that,
that,
he's the creator of what we think of as Ghostbusters.
but I think there was a lot more spacing. There was a lot of stuff going on in his draft that as different people got involved, they're like, I don't quite follow all of this. So
So that does seem to be a recurring theme because Aykroyd, I guess most people think of him from Saturday Night Live and as an actor and things like that. But there are not just Ghostbusters. There's a number of films that he did where he was a creative force behind those films as a producer, writer, director. A frequent story that you'll come across is his original idea being reined in pretty dramatically by other people around him.
yeah,
That is a common story with a lot of his films.
yeah. Probably the only movie that didn't happen with was Doctor Detroit, and there you go. That's all you need to know.
I'm still fingers crossed waiting for that director's cut of Nothing But Trouble.
There's boy.
But yeah, so there were other Ghostbusters things, and then once they did a cartoon version, that's when the legal rigmarole started up again. So that's where the Real Ghostbusters moniker came in, to separate it from the existing Ghostbusters franchises, but also to take a shot at them and claim that they are in fact the real Ghostbusters franchise. As opposed to those fakers who stole
right.
their idea
Before them.
30 years before.
Yeah. Those are the worst kind.
Yeah, those people who stole your idea decades before you had it. Hate them.
It's a jerk move. It's a jerk move.
Yeah. But as much as it sounds like I'm making fun of, I am a Dan Aykroyd fan. I'm a huge Ghostbusters fan. I saw the movie as a kid. Of course, got super into the cartoon. As I just showed you, I have original animation cells and sketches and things from the actual animated show, which are going to be going up in the arcade, just to make sure
Nice.
we're tying it all together here. Those are going to be hung up in the arcade. I was a fan of the Ghostbusters games. I had the Ghostbusters game for NES, which many people will tell you is one of the worst games ever made. I wouldn't say that. It isn't a bad game. It is just punishingly difficult. But to be fair, a lot of early Nintendo games were. That was not uncommon. That's the treatment that I was used to as a Nintendo player. So punishingly difficult, but that's not why I want to recommend, because my recommendation is also Ghostbusters, a different Ghostbusters than yours though. And like I said, when I came across the one that you recommended, it was interesting to me because all of the other iterations of first round Ghostbusters games, because once the sequel came out and then the animated series, there were games off of those. But all of the ones in that first round of Ghostbusters games were kind of similar gameplay mechanics. It would be a driving stage to get to your location. That you go into the building and try and catch the ghosts. Drive back, pick up items along the way. You had to gas up your car, recharge your different weapons, things like that. So it was all about managing your items and time and things like that. So, and they all kind of worked off a similar mechanic to varying degrees of success. So some were way better.
And it was,
Other
and it
ones.
was, it was kind of a combination because as you're talking about the various scenes, there was kind of, I won't call them shoot 'em up, a little bit more. There was action reaction elements, and then there was almost more like strategy elements in terms of fuel and all that kind of stuff, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. And certain systems pulled that off way better than other ones did. One of the most interesting ones, though, and the one that I wanted to bring up because it's one that I actually didn't play until a lot later, and it was this mechanic that got me interested in it. And there's a great YouTube video that I should have searched for so that we can include the link. I will after we record this,
Okay.
where somebody dug deep into this, did a deep dive to figure out how this was accomplished. So there was a Commodore Ghostbusters based on the movie. That was made in 6 weeks, which sounds insane, but that was pretty common back then. They rushed games as quickly as possible with very small teams, usually 1 or 2 people. It was one person who made Ghostbusters in 6 weeks. Same mechanic as the other Ghostbusters games that came out around that time, but this is the one that really started it because what they did, and speaking of the reskinning, they were working on a driving action game that they were about halfway through, and they were able to take most of that engine and just bring it over. And that's how they were able to get it done with one person in 6 weeks because he used a lot of existing coding from that driving game, switched all the visuals out to the Ghostbusters, and then just added the ghost sections to it, which all of the other console and PC ports of it kind of did variants of. What's interesting about this, though, like in those games, there is a strategy element of collecting items, and you can only keep so many items on hand and things like that. This adds a money system as well, so that you can buy items as you go. You can, of course, like a lot of computer-based games, you can save your progress. But what was really interesting is you can save your progress on other people's copies of the game. And what I mean by that is, let's just say you and I both had Commodores, and these were the cassette Commodore games. Let's say we both had Commodore cassettes. I was at my house. I save my game. It gives me my save code and everything to get back to my place. I come over your house and play your copy of Ghostbusters. I can pull up my inventory and bank account information on your copy of Ghostbusters. No internet. No.
How, how's that possible?
It sounds like magic.
Yeah, it
it's
does.
really why the game was famous, and it still has a cult following because that. Because again, it plays very similar to all of the other Ghostbusters ports you can find from that era, but that really made it stood out because this is pre-internet, and this is and I'm not bringing my cassette copy and loading it in or anything like that, or copying any or backing anything up onto a disk or a hard drive. I am just entering my information, and my saved information is coming up on yours. So there was a great somebody tracked down the guy who did the coding, and he broke it down for them. It is so the way that it worked. It is a very, very complex set of mathematical equations that is done so the way games were saved back then, you were given like a password code, a lengthy password code. The password represents a series of mathematical equations. There are thousands of potential passwords that each, depending on the equations that they solved, would tell the game how much you had in your bank account, what items you had, things like that.
Gotcha.
So it was this really complex thing that he came up with. So he was able to do that because he saved so much time essentially reskinning a driving game, then spent the rest of his time coming up with this really cool banking system for it because he knew, people would be amazed that you could play with your friends on their copies and still play your saved game on there.
That is right. I had never heard of that, but yeah, I can.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting thing, and especially like I didn't delve into a lot of the Commodore stuff. I played Commodore a little when I was younger. I really became a fan later. Finding all this crazy stuff that they were doing on Commodore, like we had previously talked about, a band hiding a Commodore program on their vinyl record.
Yep.
Things like that. Netflix actually recently did it with the Black Mirror movie. They did a Commodore program that was hidden in tones in the movie. Things like that. So they were doing crazy stuff. It was a lawless wasteland on the Commodore, but there's some really cool stuff that came out of it, and that was always one of the more interesting ones to me. So when you and I were talking about possible Halloween games and you brought up Ghostbusters, not only am I a fan, but this seemed like an interesting way to go.
Most definitely.
And of course, you can obviously legally, if you own a copy, emulate the game today, but you
Yes.
won't get quite the same effect, obviously, because jumping to your friend's emulator kind of thing. But imagine it's 1984. You don't know what the internet is.
Yeah, it's not a particularly not a particularly given current technology. It's like, oh, okay, you can pick your game up. Well, of course, yeah, that's
Of course you can.
of course, yeah, duh. And yeah, so pre-internet, pretty cool. But yeah, it makes sense that there's like a hash that lets you basically reverse engineer back to how much money he's got and all that kind of stuff. But very cool, not an easy thing to do. Very crafty.
No. Yeah, pretty amazing. And like I said, there's a video with a guy who really breaks down the whole system, and he was able to find the programmer, and he was gracious enough to talk him through it, because he always said that that was the one thing that always, as a video game player, always bothered him and amazed him. It amazed him as a kid playing it, and even as an adult couldn't figure out how they did it pre-internet and everything else. He's like, it's one thing to save the level you're at with a password or something like that, but your inventory and money and things like that just didn't make sense. So he explained to him, and in far better articulated terms than I ever could, this complicated password system that essentially saves your progress across platforms by entering in these codes.
Well, I'm sure everybody still listening has followed your advice and has liked and subscribed to the channel. Spends a lot of time on it. I'm assuming doing lots of viewing, racking up lots of view time for us. So thank you for all that. And since you're there, be sure to go to the description of this video, and we will include in it these links that Mike's talking about, so you can actually go check those out. And in fact, it wouldn't even be. Nah, I was just would love to include one of your stills, one of your cells somewhere in this somehow, either in the video or something. We'll have to figure out something on that. That'd be pretty cool as well.
Yeah, definitely. I can take some pictures for you.
Yeah, you don't have an egg. I don't want any Aegon with the blonde hair though.
I don't have them.
It's good. That was, that was about the only thing that that was the only thing that I had a dislike about everything else. But for whatever reason, it was an impediment for me getting into the cartoon. That's just like
just too much of a stumbling
it
block.
was just like, this isn't canon. This isn't.
What's interesting, like, I haven't gone. I mean, obviously, like, I have the cells and different things, but I really haven't gone back and rewatched Ghostbusters in a long time. And I know it's available on DVD and everything now. So one of these days I do need, and by Ghostbusters, the movies I have, the animated series I'm talking about, Real Ghostbusters, I haven't gone back and rewatched Real Ghostbusters. So I don't know if it would hold up, or if it's one of those things like, not to sound like I'm picking on somebody again, but like I watched Adam Sandler's new Halloween movie prior to us doing this. And yeah, so for a long time, I've told people I won't go back and rewatch the Adam Sandler movies that I loved when I was younger, because there's a part of me that realizes that while all of his movies are garbage now, he's doing the same thing he's always done. So I'm probably not going to like those movies now. I think maybe I've changed a little bit since I was 10 and may not find the same amount of humor in them. So I'm choosing to let those things in the past. So I haven't made up my mind yet if Ghostbusters, Real Ghostbusters, falls into that category.
Yep, just ignore the hair. But it seemed like you were successful anyway. Yeah, it's just like, I don't know. This guy had the darkest hair in the movie. It was like, this was, I don't know. It was a problem. Well, cool. This was fun. It was cool to kind of run through some of our favorites from there and have Tony exclude me from all intros. So that was a good time. So anything else for this week? It's not massive numbers, but we really do like we're building up subscribers. We're getting some regular viewers. We really appreciate any of you who are joining in. We'd also love to hear from you in the comments if there's types of content you'd like to see us kind of cover in the retro arcade space, because we're very, very open to that. So I just want to say thanks for that.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
And that wraps it up for this week. Thanks for watching, folks.
Thanks.